On a rainy night in a strange city, I, a woman over 60, was left with nothing. As I clutched my coat against the cold, a soaked little boy appeared with a crumpled paper. I helped him find his way home. A gate opened to a mansion. The man who emerged was the billionaire Bennett Armitage, and his gratitude sent my life down a path no one could have predicted. My name is Eleanor Hartley. I am 67 years old, and until recently, I considered myself a calm person. Today, I am simply exhausted. The trip to Montreal was my son's idea. Lucas Caldwell, my only child, had called it a healing trip. He insisted we needed to reconnect, to mend the silence that had stretched between us for too long. He painted a picture of this bilingual Canadian city, all historic charm and cozy cafes, a place to bridge the gap. I see now that the gap was only visible from my side. From his, it was a calculated distance. The hotel should have been the first alarm. It was not charming. It was a cheap, anonymous box, smelling of industrial disinfectant and stale cigarettes. The fluorescent lights in the lobby cast a sickly yellow pallor on everything. Lucas handled the check-in swiftly, his back to me. He took the plastic keycard from the clerk and slapped it into my palm without making eye contact. His touch, brief and cold. That night, in the cramped room, he asked for my phone. "I need to check our flight confirmations." "Mum," he said, his voice impatient. "And the museum tickets for tomorrow." I handed it over. It did not occur to me to question him. I woke to the sound of a vacuum cleaner in the hallway. The other bed, Lucas's bed, was neatly made. He was gone. I assumed he was getting coffee. I reached for my purse, planning to meet him downstairs. My wallet was missing. My passport, which I had tucked into the side pocket, was also gone. And my phone. He had never returned it. A cold, sharp dread pierced the morning fog in my mind. I hurried to the front desk, my thin robe pulled tight. "My son," I started, trying to keep my voice even. "Lucas Caldwell. Has he been down here?" The receptionist, a young woman with weary eyes, tapped at her keyboard. "The reservation for this room was for one night, ma'am." "One night," I repeated, the words feeling foreign. "No, we are staying the week." "The booking was for one night only," she said, her tone flat with indifference. "It was paid in full by Mr. Caldwell. Checkout was at 11 a.m. I looked at the clock above her head. It was 10:45 a.m. "But my things," I stammered. "My money, my passport. He has my phone." "I am sorry, ma'am. Checkout is in 15 minutes. We are fully booked for the weekend." At 11 o'clock precisely, I was standing on the wet pavement. The hotel door clicked shut behind me. The rain began almost immediately. Not a gentle mist, but a hard, angled sleet that drove sideways. My coat, just a thin wool blend, was never meant for this kind of weather. It was soaked through in moments, the chill sinking directly into my bones. The street was crowded. People rushed past, heads bowed under umbrellas, focused on their destinations. They swerved around me as if I were a statue, a fixed obstacle. I felt the crushing weight of invisibility, a phenomenon of old age that is far crueler than wrinkles. The world simply stops seeing you. I tucked my hands into my pockets, my fingers brushing against the familiar calluses. Decades of work, a lifetime spent as a seamstress, raising Lucas alone after his father vanished. These hands had stitched thousands of garments, paid for every meal, every school book. They had built the equity in the small apartment I owned. I thought I had built his character, too. I remembered the last thing he said to me before we left, when I hesitated at the suddenness of the trip. "Mom, you just don't understand this era." He'd scoffed, a dismissive wave of his hand. "Everything moves fast." The words echoed in my head, no longer just impatient, but sinister. He was right. I did not understand. I would not cry. I would not give him the satisfaction, even in absentia. I would survive this night, if only on the remaining scraps of my pride. I just needed shelter. A few blocks down, I saw the illuminated sign of the city train station. A roof, a public space. I huddled under the large concrete awning, shivering, trying to force my frozen mind to think. The wind howled, spraying rain onto my face. My gaze drifted over the blurred lights of taxis and the hurrying figures. And then, my eyes locked on a small shape huddled on a bench. A little boy, soaked to the skin, looking lost. He looked about 7 years old. His dark hair was plastered to his forehead, and his small body was shaking violently inside a thin school blazer. He was not crying, but his eyes were wide with a silent panic. He looked. I realized, the way I felt inside. He clutched a piece of paper in his small fist, a soggy, pulped mess. My own coldness was forgotten. I moved toward him slowly, kneeling on the wet concrete so I would not tower over him. My knees protested, but I ignored them. "Are you lost?" I asked, my voice softer than I thought possible. He stared at me, then thrust the paper out. "Chez moi," he whispered, his teeth chattering. French. Of course. I gently uncurled his fingers. The ink on the paper had run, but I could just make out a street name. Belvedere Heights. It sounded expensive. I had no phone, no GPS. But at the edge of the station shelter, there was a large, plastic-encased city map. I pointed to the boy, then to myself, then to the map. "Together?" I said, pointing at the address, then at the map's grid. He seemed to understand the gesture. He took my hand. His was small and icy. It was an impulsive, purely human connection. I, who had nothing, was now responsible for this child. We walked. We must have walked for nearly an hour. The directions were difficult, the streets steep. We left the commercial area and began to climb. This was Belvedere Heights. The name was accurate. The houses, if you could call them that, were fortresses set back from the road. Manicured gardens, perfect even in the downpour, lined the sidewalks. I felt the unseen eyes on us. Security cameras, small black domes, peered from every cornice. A private security car idled at an intersection, its driver watching us pass. I, an old, wet woman, and he, a small, wet boy, did not belong here. We finally found the address. It was not a house. It was an estate, hidden behind a monolithic wall of black steel. I saw an intercom and pressed the button. A distorted voice crackled, first in French, then in sharp English. "Who is this? This is a private property." Before I could answer, the boy stepped forward into the camera's view, waving his small hand. "Papa," he shouted, his voice thin against the rain. The gates did not buzz. They hissed open, sliding back smoothly to reveal a long, heated driveway. At the end, a massive front door was thrown open. A flood of warm, yellow light spilled out from what looked like a marble-floored cathedral. A man burst out, ignoring the rain, running down the steps. He was tall, with salt and pepper hair, wearing trousers and a cashmere sweater. He did not look at me. He just scooped the boy into his arms, crushing him to his chest, burying his face in his hair. "Theo," he choked out. "Mon Dieu. Theo." Another man, older and in a formal suit, followed with a large umbrella, which he held uselessly over the pair. The tall man finally looked at me, his eyes sharp and assessing. He said something rapid-fire in French. The older man, the butler, stepped forward. "Sir," he said to me in perfect English, "Mr. Armitage is asking how you found him." "He was at the train station," I said, my voice hoarse. "He was lost. He had this paper." Theo followed the dog, Jupiter, out the service gate. The butler explained, as if this were a common occurrence. "The rain must have disoriented him. Mr. Armitage is profoundly grateful. Please, you must come inside." I shook my head. The warmth from the open door felt like an accusation. "No, I am fine. He is home." I turned to leave. "Madame, wait." It was the tall man, Mr. Armitage. He was at my side, his hand gently on my elbow. He spoke with a quiet authority that was impossible to ignore. "I will not hear of it. You are soaked. You saved my son. You will not stand in the rain." The respect in his voice was something I had not heard directed at me in years. It was a rare, genuine thing. He guided me inside. The butler, whose name was Antoine, took my dripping coat. Another staff member appeared with a thick, impossibly soft blanket, wrapping it around my shoulders. I was led to a chair in a quiet library, and a moment later, a steaming bowl of soup was placed in my hands. It was hot. It was real. The warmth spread through my hands, up my arms, into my chest. My body revived, and with it, my dignity, which I thought had been washed away on the street, began to slowly uncurl. Mr. Armitage sat opposite me. He held a smartphone. He typed, then showed me the screen. A translation app. "What is your name?" I looked at the text, then at him. "Eleanor Hartley," I said. He typed again. "We are in your debt. Eleanor Hartley, you are safe here. But I can see you are in trouble. Deeper trouble than the rain." I just nodded, unable to speak. He typed one last time. "You will stay the night. My staff will prepare a room. In the morning, I will help you with your papers, whatever you need." It was not a question. It was a statement. The founder of Armitage Logistics and Ports, a man whose name I now recognized from shipping containers, had just made a decision. I was given a guest suite that felt larger than my entire apartment back home. The silence was absolute. The bed a cloud. I slept for 10 hours, a heavy, dreamless sleep that was more about recovery than rest. When I woke, I found my way to a bright conservatory overlooking the rain-washed gardens. Bennett was already there, reading a newspaper. Theo was at the table with a young woman, meticulously building a complex structure out of toast soldiers. "Ms. Hartley, good morning?" The young woman stood, extending a hand. She was tall, with her father's sharp eyes and a quiet, focused energy. "I'm Ava Armitage. I'm 25. I wanted to thank you personally for finding Theo. It was a bad few hours." I looked around the room. On the mantelpiece was a large, beautifully lit portrait of a woman with a warm, intelligent smile. "That is my wife, Margot," Bennett said, following my gaze. She passed away 3 years ago. Below the portrait was a small, silver plaque. I could just read the engraving, Dignity First. She started a foundation, Bennett added, his voice soft. For seniors. She believed in protecting the generation that built everything. She hated how easily they are dismissed. The irony hung thick and heavy in the air, a shared, unspoken understanding. Breakfast was warm bread, fresh eggs, and hot coffee. It was a simple, profound comfort. After. Bennett did not hand me off to an assistant. He drove me to the consulate himself. The city looked different from the passenger seat of his heavy, silent sedan. He made one call, spoke in rapid, authoritative French, and a process I assumed would take weeks of bureaucratic red tape was handled in 45 minutes. I had temporary identification. On the way back, he stopped the car outside a discreet, elegant boutique. "You need a proper coat," he said. "Mr. Armitage, I cannot accept." "Eleanor," he interrupted, but not unkindly. He turned in his seat. "This is not charity. This is responsibility. You saved my son. The world has put you in an impossible position. I am just balancing the scales." He walked inside and, with an efficient, impersonal air, purchased a warm wool coat, 2 sets of practical clothes, and a pair of sturdy, waterproof shoes. When I put them on, I felt the last of the street's chill finally leave my bones. I felt solid again. That evening, the 3 of us, Bennett, Ava, and I sat in the library. The rain had returned, tapping softly against the glass. "Tell me what happened, Eleanor," Bennett said. "Not just at the hotel. Before." So I told him. The words came out, hesitant at first, then steady. I told him about my life as a seamstress, about Lucas. And then, the core of it. It was about 3 years ago. Lucas and his wife, Sienna. They wanted to start a business. They needed capital. They asked me to sign some papers, to use my apartment as collateral for a small loan. "And you did," Bennett stated. "Yes. I thought I was helping them, building a future." And then, the silence. Lucas stopped calling as much. He became distant. This trip, this healing trip, it was the first time he'd shown any real interest in me in years. Bennett stared into the unlit fireplace for a long time. "My father built this company from a single truck," he said, his voice quiet. His partner, his best friend from childhood, handled the books. Over the course of 5 years, he created shell companies, took out loans against assets my father didn't know were leveraged. He bled him dry. It bankrupted my father. The stress, the betrayal, it killed him. He looked at me, the old anger still sharp in his eyes. "I know this kind of theft, Eleanor. It is not about money. It is about using trust as a crowbar." He took out his phone. "I am engaging my corporate counsel, a firm called Breyer and Keane. I want them to run a full title and asset search on your property. We need to see what those papers actually were." Ava, who had been listening intently, leaned forward. "Ms. Hartley, when you signed, did you ever have to authorize anything, a call from the bank? Perhaps. I don't think so. It was all at the notary's office." "The technology for fraud is terrifyingly good now," Ava said, tapping her own phone. "They can use deepfake audio, cloning your voice from a simple voicemail, to authorize transfers. They can route authorizations through remote systems. We need to check every angle." Her words sparked a memory, cold and sharp. I was back in my kitchen. The table was covered in documents. The notary was waiting, tapping his pen. Lucas was pacing by the window. And Sienna? Her hand on my arm, her voice honey-sweet. It's just a formality. Eleanor, think of it. It's for the family's future. For your grandchildren. I looked up at Bennett, the memory fading. She pressured me, I whispered. She said it was for the family. Yes, Bennett said, his expression hardening. If this is fraud, Eleanor, we will fight it. We will fight it all the way. The efficiency of Bennett Armitage's legal team was a cold, sharp blade. We met the next day in the library, but the cozy atmosphere was gone. Ava had connected a large monitor to her laptop. The room was no longer a sanctuary. It was a war room. A man named Keene, senior partner at Breyer and Keene, appeared on the screen via a secure video link. His voice was precise, devoid of emotion. Good morning, Ms. Hartley, Mr. Armitage. We began with the public registry. I must inform you, Eleanor, that your apartment is no longer listed in your name. I gripped the arms of the leather chair. What do you mean? The property was transferred into the name of Lucas Caldwell 3 weeks after the date on the documents you described signing. Keene said. He then sold it. The apartment was sold 2 months ago to an entity called the North Meridian Trust. A shell corporation, Bennett said. It was not a question. Correct, Keene replied. A blind trust designed to obscure ownership. The sale price was $238,000. My life's work. My home. $238,000. We followed the money, Ava said, her voice tight. She took over the screen, displaying a complex flowchart. The funds from the sale landed in Lucas's personal account. Within 48 hours, the entire sum was moved again, transferred to this. A new name appeared. Halcyon Ridge Ventures. What is Halcyon Ridge? I asked, the name tasting like ash. It is an SPV, a special purpose vehicle. Ava explained. A company created for a single, specific project. Its sole director and signatory is Sienna Vale, your son's wife. The pieces were slotting into place, forming a picture of devastating clarity. But I still didn't understand the mechanism. How? I whispered. I never spoke to a bank. I never authorized a sale. My signature was only for collateral. That is the critical component, Keene said. The bank has a record of authorization. We requested the audio file. He played it. A voice filled the library. My voice. Yes, I, Eleanor Hartley, authorize the full transfer of title. That is correct. It was me. It was my hesitation, the slight rasp in my throat. I stared at the monitor, my blood running cold. I never said those words. I had never, ever had that conversation. It's a deep fake, Ava said, her voice full of quiet rage. We had an acoustic forensics team analyze the waveform. It's an AI clone, almost certainly generated from old voicemails. Perhaps even the birthday video messages Lucas asked me to record last year. The signature on the final sale was notarized. Keene continued. At a firm called Riverton Notary. We are looking into them. They have a history of complaints regarding elder affairs. The hotel room, the rain, the clicking lock. My phone, I said, the realization landing like a physical blow. He took my phone. He said he was checking our tickets. He needed it for the one-time password, Bennett said, his jaw tight. The bank would have sent a final confirmation code to your device. He approved it himself. This trip was not an escape. Eleanor. It was the final step of the theft. Ava's fingers moved across her keyboard, and another document appeared. It was a rental agreement. They didn't just sell it, Eleanor. They are profiting from it. Lucas, posing as the property manager for the North Meridian Trust, is renting your apartment to a young couple. They are paying him every month. Based on the audio fabrication and the money trail, we secured a warrant for their electronic communications. Keene said, "The messages between Lucas and Sienna are conclusive." A text message lit up the screen. It was from Sienna, sent to Lucas the day before our trip. "The weather report looks good. Rain in Montreal is the perfect cover. Just get the phone, get the last form signed, and leave her. It will take her days to get help. They weren't just stealing from me, they were disposing of me." "And we know the motive," Ava said. She pulled up a sleek, pastel-coloured website, Eden Salt and Light. Sienna's new wellness studio. She was using the proceeds from your apartment to fund her grand opening. Bennett stood up. He walked to the window and stared out at the grey Canadian sky. He was silent for a full minute. When he spoke, his voice was low and lethal. "Keene, I want a cross-border judicial freeze filed within the hour. Freeze Halcyon Ridge. Freeze North Meridian. Freeze their personal accounts. I want that wellness studio shut down before the paint is dry." He turned to me, his eyes locking with mine. "Antoine is booking your flight back to Harbour Point. You will not be going alone." I looked at the screen, at the web of names and arrows, at the text message that planned my abandonment. The chill I had felt on the street corner, the exhaustion that had soaked into my bones, was gone. It was replaced by something else, a slow, rising heat. The pain was still there, but it was crystallizing. It was turning into fire. With my temporary travel documents, I was on a plane within hours. Bennett Armitage did not send me with an assistant. He flew with me. We landed in Harbour Point, Maine, on a grey, windswept afternoon. The salt in the air, a scent I had known my entire life, now felt foreign. We did not go to my apartment. We went to a hotel, a clean, secure suite that Bennett's team had arranged. The lawyers from Breyer and Keene had already filed the complaint. It was a barrage, civil fraud, forgery, financial elder abuse, and an emergency motion to freeze every asset associated with Lucas Caldwell, Sienna Vale, Halcyon Ridge Ventures, and the North Meridian Trust. "We have also sent a letter to your son's attorney," Keene explained over a secure line, his voice crisp. "It is an invitation to self-report and cooperate. We give him a narrow door to walk through before we kick in the main one." While the legal machine began to grind, I needed to see my home. Bennett came with me, a silent, imposing presence at my side. The brick facade of my building looked the same, but it felt like a stranger's house. Mr. Doyle, the doorman who had worked there for 30 years, was in the lobby. His face lit up when he saw me, then crumpled in confusion. "Mrs. Hartley, we heard you'd moved to Florida with your son." "Hello, Mr. Doyle," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. That was not quite the case. "But Lucas, he came by about 6 weeks ago," Mr. Doyle said, his brow furrowed. "He cleaned the whole place out. Said you'd retired and he was handling your affairs. He had all the paperwork. It looked official." He paused, looking at me, then at Bennett, finally understanding. Oh, Eleanor. He had the movers take everything, even your sewing machine. My sewing machine. The tool of my trade. The machine I had used to build a life for him. I walked to the old, wrought iron staircase, my hand finding the familiar worn spot on the brass railing. I gripped it, the cold metal a shock to my system. I was not just fighting for money or a roof. He had tried to erase me. First, I whispered, so low I barely heard it myself. I will get my name back. We returned to the hotel. That evening, a new phone provided by Bennett's team buzzed on the table. An unknown number. I answered on speakerphone, as instructed. Eleanor. Thank goodness. Sienna's voice. It was like warm honey, thick and suffocatingly sweet. We have been so worried. Lucas is a mess. This is all a terrible misunderstanding. That law firm. They're so aggressive. Why did you not just talk to us? What do you want? Sienna. I want to fix this. Just us. She purred. A private negotiation. For the family. There is no need for these courts, for these billionaires to be involved. We can sort this out quietly. Lucas is just heartbroken you would think this of him. I looked at Bennett. He simply shook his head. A small, definitive motion. All communications, I said, my voice a flat line. Will go through my lawyers. I ended the call. The pressure was mounting, and not just in private. The Harbour Point Chronicle got a tip. The front page of the local news section the next morning had a headline, Local Woman Alleges Vicious Elder Fraud. Mystery Billionaire Funds Legal Battle. The story was vague on details, but heavy on implication. Suddenly, I was not just an invisible old woman. I was a cause. Public sympathy. A force I had never considered was now firmly on my side. From the legal team, we learned that Lucas and Sienna were fracturing. Lucas was oscillating between panic, wanting to flee, and considering the narrow door of cooperation. Sienna, however, was pushing a different narrative, throw the Riverton notary under the bus, claim they were the ones who forged the documents, and that she and Lucas were victims of a complex scheme. That night, another storm rolled in off the Atlantic. The rain hammered against the hotel window, a hard, rhythmic drumming. It was not the hopeless sound I had heard in Montreal. This was different. It was the sound of a clock ticking, a countdown. The courtroom was cold, all polished wood and fluorescent light, designed to strip emotion from the proceedings. This was only a preliminary hearing, but the small room was packed. The prosecutor, a sharp woman in a grey suit, did not waste time. She was not telling a story. She was building a cage, bar by bar. Your Honour, she began. The evidence paints a clear picture of a predatory, multi-stage theft. She presented the flowchart we had seen in the library, showing the $238,000 moving from the North Meridian Trust to Halcyon Ridge Ventures. She played the audio file, my voice authorizing the sale. We have a sworn affidavit from a leading acoustic analyst, she stated, confirming this audio to be a sophisticated AI fabrication, a deep fake. Then, she moved to the signature. A forensics expert was called, a man who looked more like an artist than a scientist. He displayed 2 signatures on the large screen, one from my old passport, one from the fraudulent sale document. The forgery is skilled, he explained, pointing with a laser. It attempts to mimic the natural tremor of an older hand. But the pressure is wrong. The downstrokes are too heavy, and the hesitation points where the pen rests are inconsistent with Mrs. Hartley's established writing habits. This signature was drawn, Your Honour, not written. Lucas's attorney, a man who looked slick and uncomfortable, stood up. Your Honour, this is being blown out of proportion. Mr. Caldwell maintains his mother was confused, perhaps, but that she gave verbal consent for him to manage her affairs. She was, and is, a willing participant. The judge, a woman with zero patience, peered down at him. Verbal consent for the sale of a primary residence. Do you have any text, any email, any recording of this alleged consent? Counsel. Well, no, Your Honour. But the family dynamic? The family dynamic is not what we are here to discuss. The paperwork is, and the paperwork, according to the state, is fraudulent. Sit down. The prosecutor advanced. We also have email correspondence between Ms. Sienna Vale and the principal at Riverton Notary. An email flashed on the screen. It was from Sienna. We need this file closed by Friday. He is a VIP client. We have bank records, the prosecutor added, showing a $10,000 consulting fee paid to the notary's personal account from Halcyon Ridge Ventures 1 day later. Sienna was not in the courtroom. Her lawyer claimed she was suffering from a stress-related illness and could not attend. Lucas sat alone, his face pale and waxy. The judge granted him conditional bail, but with an ankle monitor and a surrendered passport. Before the hearing concluded, the judge asked if I wished to make a statement. I stood, my hands gripping the wooden rail in front of me. I looked at Lucas. He would not meet my eyes. I am not here because I was destitute, Your Honour, I said, my voice clear and loud. I am here because I was robbed. My name, my home, my past, they were stolen by my son. I sat down. I could feel Bennett Armitage's presence behind me. He sat in the last row, a statue of quiet fury, his gaze fixed on the back of Lucas's head. He never moved, never looked away. His silence was its own testimony. The media was already outside, a small cluster of cameras. The words, financial elder abuse, were being spoken into microphones. My lawyer used the momentum, immediately filing a motion for temporary injunctive relief. To have control of my apartment, my home returned to me while the case proceeded. But the final blow came from the prosecutor. Your Honour, given that the fraudulent audio was created in Maine to deceive a bank in Delaware, and the victim was transported across an international border to Canada to finalize the crime, we are also in communication with federal authorities regarding wire fraud and conspiracy charges. I watched Lucas. His face, which had been pale, turned a sickly shade of grey. He finally understood. This was not a family dispute. He had not just crossed a state line, he had crossed a federal one. I thought the hearing was the end of the unravelling, but it was only the second layer. While the prosecutors focused on Lucas, Ava Armitage had stayed in the library in Montreal, digging. She had not stopped analysing Sienna's company, Halcyon Ridge Ventures. She was looking for weaknesses, for other investors, for any partners Sienna might have. It was buried deep in the incorporation documents, Ava explained over the phone, her voice tight with the thrill of the hunt. Halcyon was not just Sienna. There was a minority stakeholder, holding 49% of the company, a firm called Vesper Compliance. The name meant nothing to me. It meant everything to Bennett's team. Vesper Compliance, Ava continued, is a consulting firm owned and operated by Gideon Vale. Vale, I asked. Sienna's older brother. Bennett finished, his voice grim. He was in the hotel room with me, listening on speaker. Ava, run his name. Already did, she said. Gideon Vale has been investigated twice, though never convicted, for money laundering. He specializes in creating clean corporate vehicles for questionable funds. Bennett looked at me, the pieces visibly clicking into place in his mind. This was never just a son stealing from his mother, Eleanor. This was a professional operation. Lucas was the inside man, the emotional tool. But Sienna and her brother, they provided the mechanism. They built the machine. The legal team, now armed with a new name, expanded their warrants. They found security footage. 2 days before I signed the collateral papers, a camera in a parking garage across the street from the Riverton notary office recorded a meeting. Gideon Vale, identifiable from his driver's license photo, was seen getting into the notary's car. He was inside for 10 minutes. He exited the car carrying a briefcase. The notary drove away. And then, the texts. Not just between Lucas and Sienna, but between Sienna and Gideon. A message from Sienna, sent the week the apartment sale closed, when the apartment money is cleared. Eden Salt and Light finally opens its doors. You were right. The old-fashioned way is too slow. The international component, which had terrified Lucas, became the key. The Canadian bank that received the wire transfer from the sale, they flagged it. Ava reported. The day Lucas abandoned you in Montreal, the sheer size of the transfer, immediately followed by the attempt to move it offshore via Halcyon, triggered a SAR, a suspicious activity report. They filed it and froze the funds before we even called. Bennett clarified. Lucas abandoning you was the final step. But the rain, the chaos, it was also meant to cover the electronic trail. He failed. The bank caught it. The case was no longer simple. The prosecutor's office split the charges. Lucas and Sienna remained on the primary file for fraud, forgery, and elder abuse. But a new, parallel investigation was opened into Gideon Vale, Sienna, and Vespa compliance for conspiracy to commit wire fraud and money laundering. The wall of silence around them began to crack. The North Meridian Trust, the shell company that bought my apartment, was just a pair of lawyers in Delaware. Faced with federal charges, they folded immediately. They agreed to testify. Their statement was damning. They had been approached by an estate broker representing the Caldwell family, a broker who turned out to be Sienna herself, using a false name. She had offered them a quick flip, a below-market price for an off-market cash deal, provided they asked no questions and used her preferred notary. The pressure was coming from all sides. A few days later, a plain white envelope arrived at the hotel, forwarded from the legal team. It had no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It was not a confession, but an apology. I was the receptionist at Riverton. It read, I knew it was wrong. He, the notary, he told us to just process the files, that the family was difficult. He said the bonuses depended on it. I am so sorry. I have quit my job. I handed the note to my lawyer. More proof of internal pressure, of a coordinated plan. The news of Gideon's involvement and the money laundering investigation was leaked. The public narrative changed overnight. I was no longer just the sympathetic victim of a greedy son. I was the woman who had inadvertently pulled the thread on a sophisticated criminal ring operating right here in Harbour Point. The tone of the local news shifted from pity to anger. They were not just demanding justice for me, they were demanding protection for everyone. The public wanted punishment. Bennett did not just watch the legal battle, he escalated the public one. This was not just my fight. He understood it was a systemic failure. He announced that his late wife's foundation, Dignity First, would be hosting an emergency seminar in Harbour Point. It was not a fundraiser. It was a public forum on financial elder abuse. He flew in forensic accountants, fraud investigators, and lawyers specializing in geriatric law. He invited the press, and he invited the public, especially the city's senior population. They asked me to speak. I stood at a small podium in a crowded hotel ballroom. The air was thick with the scent of coffee and anxiety. I looked out at the audience, at the hundreds of faces, many of them lined with the same quiet fears I had lived with. I did not read from a script. I did not raise my voice. And I did not cry. I simply told them the truth. I spoke of Montreal, of the hotel, of the cold rain on the pavement. I told them about the deepfake audio, the missing passport, and the lie about Florida. I spoke of my life's work, of my sewing machine, of my name. I was not a victim begging for pity. I was a witness delivering testimony. The local news cameras were there. By that evening, my speech was on every local affiliate, and by the next morning, clips were circulating online. The effect was immediate. Ava informed me that the Harbour Point Legal Aid phone bank, which normally received perhaps 15 calls a day, was overwhelmed. They received over 5 times that number in 24 hours. My story had unlocked a flood of silent suffering. Sienna, seeing the narrative spiral out of her control, attempted a desperate countermove. She gave an exclusive interview to a sympathetic online columnist, framing herself as the ultimate victim. She wept, claiming Lucas had controlled her, that her brother Gideon had misled her, and that she was just a trusting wife trying to build a small business. It was a compelling performance. It was ruined the next day, when a gossip website, citing an anonymous source, leaked security photos. The images showed Sienna in a high-end jewelry boutique, time-stamped the day after my apartment sale closed. She was laughing, trying on a diamond necklace I knew must have cost tens of thousands of dollars. The formal mechanisms of justice were catching up. The Riverton notary was suspended by the state licensing board. The manager, facing his own federal indictment, confessed. He admitted to accepting a cash envelope from Gideon Vale to close the file by Friday and to ignore the irregularities. To hammer the point home, Ava released the full technical breakdown of the deepfake audio. She showed, step by step, how the AI had been trained. The source material, 2 happy birthday video messages Lucas had insisted I record for him on my phone over the last year. He had not been sentimental. He had been harvesting my voice. The bank. Seeing the mountain of irrefutable evidence, the forgery, the deepfake. The notary's confession activated its professional liability insurance. My lawyers received a quiet memo. It was the signal of defeat. The bank was preparing to pay the claim rather than be associated with the fraud in open court. The night before the final pre-trial motions, Lucas came to my hotel. He bypassed the security Bennett had posted, simply waiting in the lobby until he saw me exit the elevator. He looked gaunt, his eyes frantic. "Mum," he whispered, rushing forward. "Mum, you have to stop this. Please. You're ruining me. They're talking federal time. Just call them off. Tell them it was a misunderstanding." He was crying. the shallow, desperate tears of a child caught in a lie. I looked at him, the man I had raised, the stranger who had left me in the rain. I felt nothing but a cold, vast emptiness. "My name is my own. Lucas," I said. I stepped past him and walked out the door. We were scheduled to appear in court the next morning. Sienna did not show up. She failed to report to her bail officer. She was gone. The rumor was that Gideon had arranged for her to leave the state, that they had both vanished. That night, a new storm front moved in. For 3 straight days, a cold, cleansing rain fell on Harbour Point. It was as if the city itself was standing with me, washing away the filth before the final act. I did not want to go. A gala. It was the annual Harbour Point Port fundraiser, a glittering affair of local money and influence, and Bennett Armitage was the keynote speaker. It felt wrong, like celebrating while my life was still in ruins. "You should come, Eleanor," Ava had insisted gently, laying out a simple, elegant, dark blue pantsuit. "With me?" Bennett's reasoning was more strategic. "Lucas will be there," he said, his voice flat. "The legal counsel for the North Meridian Trust is one of the fund's biggest donors. Lucas knows this. He is cornered. He is desperate. And his bail conditions do not restrict him from public events. He will try to make one last gamble, to approach the Trust's man, to try and negotiate some kind of post-trial deal behind our backs." So I went. It was not a party. It was a battlefield. Bennett's security team, usually invisible, was quietly efficient. Ava explained it in the car, her voice low. "We have a legal, court-approved geofence set up around the ballroom and the immediate vicinity. If Sienna Vale's or Gideon Vale's phone pings a tower within that radius, the police, who are already on standby, will be notified instantly. The warrants for their arrest are active." The ballroom was suffocating, a cavern of crystal chandeliers and forced laughter. Bennett went to the main table near the dais, and I stayed on the periphery with Ava. Just as Bennett had predicted, I saw him. Lucas. He looked ravaged, his suit hanging off his frame, his eyes darting nervously. He was not eating. He was hunting. I watched him track his prey, intercepting the man from North Meridian near the bar. Lucas was talking fast, leaning in, his hands gesturing with a desperate, pleading energy. He was trying to salvage the wreckage, to cut a deal, to save himself. Bennett's speech began. He spoke of logistics, of global trade, of the future of the Harbour Point port. He was charismatic, powerful, and the room was silent. Then he paused, looking out over the crowd. "But the future of commerce," he said, his voice dropping slightly. "The future of this community depends on trust. It is our most valuable and most fragile commodity." Behind him, the massive LED screens that had been showing artistic photos of container ships suddenly went dark, then lit up with a new image. It was the flowchart, the one from the library. It was anonymized, no full names or account numbers, but the timeline was unmistakable. An arrow moved from Harbour Point residence to personal account to Halcyon Ridge Ventures to a box labelled Frozen Canadian account. A low murmur went through the room. Then, the screen changed again, displaying the text of the anonymous, terrified letter from the Riverton notary employee. A collective, audible gasp filled the silence. Lucas looked up, his face sheet white. He saw the flowchart. He saw the letter. He saw every head in the room turn toward him. He bolted, not for the main entrance, but for a side exit leading to the terraces. Ava was already moving. She was not looking at Lucas. She was looking past him, her phone raised. I followed her gaze. Lucas was not just fleeing. He was running to someone. A woman in a wide-brimmed black hat, her back to the ballroom, stood in the shadows of the terrace. He grabbed her arm, pressing a small, dark object into her hand. A USB drive. It was Sienna. She had been here all along, at that exact second. Ava's phone buzzed, a sharp, insistent vibration. "Geofence," she murmured, already dialing. "They have her." The police, stationed outside, were activating the warrants. Sienna saw the flash from Ava's camera. Lucas saw it. He realized he had been caught. In a room full of the city's most powerful people, handing evidence to his fugitive wife. He stumbled back in pure panic, colliding hard with a passing waiter. A tray of full wine glasses crashed to the marble floor. Red wine splashed across the front of Lucas's white shirt like a fresh wound. He was frozen, staring at the stain, the broken glass at his feet. Bennett was suddenly there, having left the stage without anyone noticing. He stood over my son. He did not shout. He did not touch him. He just said, his voice low and clear, "The only path left is confession." I watched them take him. The hotel security first, then the police, who met Sienna at the terrace door. It was fast, clinical, and devastating. I could not breathe. I pushed open the glass doors and walked out onto the balcony, away from the scene. The rain was still falling, a cold, sharp downpour that turned the bay into a churning sheet of black. I stood there, watching the water, waiting for the morning, waiting for the end. And then I heard it, cutting through the sound of the rain and the traffic, the sharp, unmistakable wail of police sirens getting closer. The stage was set. The main trial was not a battle, it was a foregone conclusion. The prosecutor, who had lived with this case for weeks, stood before the court and systematically connected every piece. She presented a single, unified chart. At the top, Gideon Vale, the architect. Beneath him, Sienna Vale, the operator and broker. And at the bottom, Lucas Caldwell, the key, the emotional crowbar used to break into my life. The evidence, which we had gathered piece by piece, was now presented as an overwhelming, crushing wave. The acoustic expert returned, demonstrating for the jury exactly how the deepfake was constructed from the birthday messages. The signature expert showed the enlarged, hesitant forgery, calling it a clear and amateurish imitation. The bank officer testified about the OTP authorization, confirming it came from my phone, which was pinging a cell tower in Montreal at the exact moment of the transfer. The lawyers from North Meridian Trust testified that Sienna, using an alias, had pitched the no questions asked deal, and the employee from Riverton Notary, given immunity, testified that he had watched his boss accept the envelope from Gideon and subsequently order the backdating of documents. Lucas was given the chance to speak before sentencing. He stood, a shell of the man I had raised. He did it. He confessed. He admitted he took my phone in the hotel room. He admitted he approved the OTP. He admitted he signed my name to the final sale documents. But I was under so much pressure. He wept, the words tumbling out. Sienna. She had these plans. The money. It was just supposed to be a loan, a temporary thing. She and Gideon. They made it sound so simple. I never meant. I never meant for this to happen. Sienna, her face a mask of cold fury, spoke next. Her defense was simple. She blamed Lucas for everything. She claimed he was a financial incompetent, a compulsive liar who had forged the documents without her knowledge, and then, in a panic, implicated her and her brother to save himself. It was a vicious, calculated performance. The prosecutor's only response was to play the security footage from the gala, the silent, grainy video of Sienna in her black hat, taking the USB drive from Lucas. The jury saw the exchange. Her defense evaporated. The judge read the verdict. Guilty, all of them. Lucas, guilty of fraud, forgery, and financial elder abuse. Sienna, guilty of fraud, forgery, elder abuse, and conspiracy to commit money laundering. Gideon, tried in absentia, guilty on all counts. The sentence was swift. Full financial restitution, equivalent to the market value of my apartment, plus punitive damages. The complete forfeiture of all assets within Halcyon Ridge Ventures and Vespa compliance, and a permanent, legally binding restraining order, prohibiting Lucas Caldwell or Sienna Vale from ever coming within 500 feet of me or my residence again. As the marshals moved in, Lucas turned. He looked at me, his face collapsing. We were in a modern courtroom, all glass and steel. The rain, which had been falling all morning, was sliding down the massive windows behind him. The streaks of water ran across his face, and it looked, for a split second, like he was the one left out in the storm. "Mum," he said, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Mum." I did not answer. The judge looked at me. "Mrs. Hartley," she said, her voice softening for the first time. "Is there anything else you would like to say?" I stood up. I looked at the judge, at the jury, at the man in handcuffs who was once my son. "I got my name back," I said. "That is all." The heavy courtroom doors opened. The sound of the city, of the rain, rushed in. It was pouring, a cold, hard, cleansing rain that hit the wide granite steps and bounced high. Bennett Armitage was standing just outside, waiting. He had not attended the final verdict, respecting that this was my moment. He just looked at me, and he nodded. Once. I took a deep breath of the wet air. I pulled my new coat tight. Then, I walked out of the courthouse, my head held high, and stepped directly into the rain. The flashbulbs from the news cameras were blinding, exploding like 1,000 tiny suns. But I did not stop. I just kept walking, moving through the water, leaving the shell of my old life behind and owning the one I had just taken back. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are all tuning in from, so please drop a comment below, share your thoughts, and let's connect. And if you have a moment, please subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, give this video a like, and hit that hype button so this story can be heard by others.